You're listening to Let's Talk About Fatherlessness with host Sean Teis, where we talk about leading fatherless families to the Heavenly Father.
Hey, welcome back to Let's Talk About Fatherlessness. My name is Sean Teis. I'm excited to have our guest today, Candice Crear. She has an amazing story, and I'm excited to dive into this with you, Candice. Candice, you just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your ministry that you have going right now, then we'll dive into your story.
Absolutely. So, hi, everybody. I'm Candice Crear. I started From Fatherless to Fearless back in 2016, and it really stemmed from my own story. But it's an organization where we focus on primarily teen girls, but we also do serve some adult women. And whether father has passed away, walked away, is in jail, or emotionally unavailable, we are open arms for them. And so we walk with them on their healing journey and really are in pursuit of wholeness. And we do that through a program we have called Bridge. And that Bridge program is all about bridging the gap between where they are and where they want to be.
I love that because a lot of times the girls get neglected. They think that, well, because there's a mom there, that they don't need extra attention. And so that's something we've kind of fought against with our ministry that, we do need to focus on the boys, and there needs to be a lot more attention on the fatherless boys, but there also needs to be attention on the fatherless girls. And there's so many girls that become a statistic because of that, because they think that the single mom has it all together and she is able to just help them through it. But they need mentors. They need people to pour into their life. And so I love what you're
I
doing.
agree.
Now, I asked you before about if you had books, and you're like, I have 5. So let's go ahead and talk about your books. Tell us about your books that you've written.
Yeah, so my books, they really focus on fatherlessness. So my initial book that I wrote was Invisible Dad, and that story was one that took everyone by storm, and it really talked about my journey and my journey of forgiveness and overcoming what I had been through. And then over the years, I have done From Fatherless to Fearless 1 and 2, and then Invisible God, I'm Waiting, which is all about the waiting process. And then the last one is a 30-day journey, a journal that really is about really focusing on your path to success. So this one really focuses on that specific journey and how do we make sure that we are very intentional for those 30 days. And so it's called On Your Mark, Get Set, Reset. So resetting your path and what you want to focus on.
Those sound like some amazing resources, and they're at your website. I'm sure they're wherever you can find books and stuff like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yes. They're on
Amazon, places like that.
Amazon. All of my books are on Amazon.
Mm.
They're also on my website, CandiceCrear.com as well.
Okay, wonderful. That's so great. Now let's go more into your programming. Now you have um tell us about your programming for fatherless girls. What does that
Yeah.
entail? Just go deeper into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Bridge program is actually a program that I wrote based off my own story. So the Bridge program came from me. It came from my fatherless journey. So we have a 14-week version and an 8-week version. The 14-week we have at institutions that are more where attendance is required, right? And so we facilitate during the day, during the school day, and also in the juvenile jail for the 14-week version. And so those students, of course, are there as a class and they get a grade for this actual program. The lessons range and it starts off, with the vision board party. So we have the fun in the front, right? But as we continue through that bridge program, it gets tough, right? We're talking about facing the truth. We're talking about taking them off their hook. We're talking about letting go. We're also talking about how to increase your confidence. What does accountability look like? How to set boundaries. Every single week, we have a different lesson that we're focused on, even financial wellness. Because as we know, they're 4 times more likely to live in poverty. How do we get them from living in poverty? They need financial literacy, right? But we have to get their mental state where it needs to be before we even get there. And so financial wellness is not even till week 12. We also walk through forgiveness and what forgiveness actually looks like, really debunking those myths for them, understanding that forgiveness is not about whether you feel like it or not, because oftentimes that's what they understand is that if I don't feel like it, I don't need to do it. It also is really debunking the myth of whether or not the person has done it. They still have done it, whether or not you forgive them or not, right? And so forgiving them doesn't wipe away what that person has done. And so we walk with them through these lessons and really helping them to understand where do I want to go, which is why that vision board is first, casting that vision so that the 14 weeks is something that they are in pursuit of, that specific vision. And that it's not just based off of what we're saying. We want to help you get to where you want to be. So that's what the Bridge program is. The 8-week version is for institutions where it's an after school program or in combination with other nonprofit organizations. That 8-week version, we created that because after school at a rec center, it's too long for these kids to have to go through a 14-week program. So we did an 8-week version as a shorter program for them, but also still hits on the necessary parts of the program overall, the longer version, to ensure that they still get the meat of the Bridge program.
Wow, that's so good. Now is this biblically based or is it secular to be able to get into public schools? What?
So it is secular, but I actually wrote it based on Bible principles.
Yeah,
So everything
understood.
we teach is biblically based from a Bible principle perspective. But in order for us to get into public schools, we're not allowed to use that type of verbiage, et cetera.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I have a public school assembly that I do. I can go in and it's biblically based where it has principles of the Bible, but I
Mhm.
can't. There's no references or I don't talk about God because I can speak in front of a middle school of 800 kids, and so I completely understand. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes you have to be kind of covert in your operation because of going into schools and things like that, and you're able to
And
mentor and
it's
stuff.
all about
Yeah,
strategy, right? 100%. It's all about strategy.
yeah.
The kids in these school systems, they need it. And if we can go in there from a strategic perspective and still teach biblical principles, that's what we need to do to make sure we impact way beyond just the church, but everyone else.
Exactly, and honestly, who's gonna teach them about those biblical principles if we don't have stuff like that? So I'm on the same page as you. I have our ministry, God is my dad, and we have everything, but we also have this other thing where it's secular, and the goal is to eventually get them to help them find the gospel eventually, like down the road through social media or something. But yeah, we I completely understand that. So now how does it work then so do you contract with a public school or do you get grants for this? Or how does that work for your organization?
Yeah, so depending on the institution is whether or not we are going to pursue grants to support the programming or even direct funding. We also get sponsorships as well. And so our funding really ranges and we make sure to diversify it on purpose. But we predominantly are funded by grants by 65%.
Wow.
And then the rest is really divvied up based on the other revenue streams that we have.
And so then if the school would bring you in and then you would do it, it's all after, is it all after school or you said it's during school, some of it? Is it during like a,
No, so the public schools that we are at, it's actually during the day, they
wow.
have an
Okay.
advisory period. And that advisory period, they have a homeroom, but that's the opportunity for other institutions to come in and actually facilitate to these students.
That's
And
great.
so during that advisory period, we actually pull these girls out into a separate classroom, and we facilitate our programming to those girls.
That's
They
wonderful.
are
Now, so
selected via we've done pitches at lunchtime where we actually pitch to the whole lunch period, and those come sign up. Also, girls are placed in our program through social workers, our resource coordinators, our principals, those who think that our program would be the best for them. But no matter how they get there, of course, we facilitate the program. We also, I want to make sure that everyone knows this. In order to teen girls to talk about mental health, you better be bringing in some snacks, which is what we do. But we also give away gift cards every week. Every week, I am giving them a gift card. I get them from Bath and Body, Chipotle, Target, Walmart. It doesn't even matter, right? Somebody gets a gift card, but we're also bringing in those treats because, adults don't even want to talk about mental health, let alone kids. And so we need to always have those rewards in place so that we can keep them in the classroom and that they understand and they learn the material as well as participate.
now it's 14 parts you said, right? So what do they graduate then and go to a next level or are they just done with it or they continue with the group and do it over again? Or how do you keep going with them? Do you do that?
Yeah, so we have there's 14 weeks, which is typically an entire semester. So it's either January through May, or we do August/September through December. After that, there is a graduation. So we take them on some type of trip. We for the winter we took them ice skating downtown. This summer we're taking them to Kings Island, which is an amusement park here in Cincinnati. And so after the program, we like to keep in touch with them if they want to continue, which we have a class right now that said they did not want to disband at all.
Mm.
We're actually
Wow.
doing career talks and really focused on their career and how to make sure that they pursue that correctly. That's what we're doing with that specific class. But typically they graduate, and they are ones that really recruit others into the class, hoping that they just help them, their friends on their healing journey. That's what bridge is all about, right? Not only that you cross the bridge, but you go get someone else to walk them through that as well. So that's what it is right now. We also have program events. And so those are targeted. We actually started targeting these events towards mothers and really supporting them. Because what we're seeing is that not only a huge deterioration between the mother daughter relationship, but also that we're helping the daughter to heal and she's going back into that traumatic environment. Right. And so we're trying to help these mothers engage with us, have that same love for that their daughter has for us, right? That we've had to earn, no question about it. But really helping them from that perspective to parent well, but also to heal their own wounds so that they're not bleeding all over their daughter.
I can imagine that. I mean, growing up fatherless, I know that I often, if somebody took an interest in me or cared about me, I got clingy towards those people because it's like, hey, they actually. So I'm sure that there's some of that where you probably have to deal with where they get clingy towards you. Where like, hey, these people care about us, and then it's 14 weeks is over and you're done. So that's really cool that you guys are trying to figure out ways to keep going with them.
Yeah, we try to figure out ways to keep engaging with them, tapping into them, calling them every now and again, um, and texting them. Even from a perspective when they come in our class and when something seems wrong, I talked to I had a class this morning, but there's one girl I'm getting ready to actually call this afternoon because she came in our class, wanted to sit in the back. Typically, she's talkative. This time she wasn't. Something's up, right? And so because we are facilitators in the room, we need to be able to notice those types of things
Mhm.
to say, I see you. I know something was up. I'm going to contact you because I care about you, right? A lot of times, especially in schools, that they are lost in the number. Like, they don't get that attention. They come from a traumatic household, they leave back to a traumatic household, and even teachers, not to their fault, but they are really beating down the curriculum, right? Learning English, learning math, getting the test grades, etc. And so it's all about like who cares about how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. And so we're able to step in and say, we care, right? And to actually exhibit that and not let it not just be talk.
That's so powerful. And now, going into your let's go into your story a little bit. Let's talk about your story, how you got to this point. Let's talk about your childhood. I know that you have a story of fatherlessness. Just tell us about the young Candice, little Candice. What was your story of fatherlessness?
Yeah, so my father walked away when I was 2 years old, and I didn't really notice, really a difference because I had 5 aunts. My uncles lived in Kentucky. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, so I have 5 aunts, and I'm sorry, I'm from Dayton, Ohio. I live in Cincinnati right now, but, um, my uncles lived in Kentucky, and I didn't notice that I was really missing, some type of father figure. As time went on, when I went to kindergarten, I started noticing like fathers were picking up their children. And so there was something, really missing from my perspective. My father would call every now and again, but I didn't hear from him for years until he just stopped calling. By the time I had reached 10, 11, and 12, I would try to engage with my mom on these conversations about my dad, and they went okay until I reached 12 years old. Thankfully, my mom raised me in church, but by the time I reached 12, I wanted to have that conversation of, why my father wasn't here. And so she had brought up she was like, great, it's great that he's not here because of the fact that he was on drugs and he would have bought our family life down anyway. And so that's what was not a conversation that I wanted to have. I wanted the white picket fence. I wanted him to be reunited with us. I just wanted to hear when he's coming back. And so my mom never did talk bad about my father, but that day, because I was not wanting that response, I shut down talking to her at all about my father again. And so I reached high school, my freshman year, still with the anger, still with the disappointment and the resentment, which was, of course, growing. I didn't have self confidence. I had already considered suicide by that time. And thankfully, God did not let me do it. But these types of things were just running in my mind of I don't understand why he left me. What's wrong with me? Why me? Why couldn't he have been here? Those types of questions that I had. So by the time I reached 14 years old, I was molested on a school bus in high school after a high school football game. And that took another detriment to me from a perspective of I wasn't aware of how to handle that type of trauma. I was never around it. So I didn't respond. I didn't know how to respond to it. So I ended up putting on this whole perfection facade in high school. We have the daddy problem, we have the molestation problem. And I just decided to put on and make sure everybody knew that I was perfect. I would get straight A's. I would make sure I was on honor roll. I would be in every single school function, making sure that I'm the president or the secretary, whatever I could do to have, just people just pat me on my back to tell me I'm worth something. And that lasted, of course, through high school and really me putting on that perfect picture. But of course, that can't last too long. So by the time I reached college, I was introduced to alcohol, and then I would start getting drunk to drown out my problems, drown out my pain, and not address it. But I would make sure, because I was raised in church, that I would make sure to get to church on time. Like I would be out all night, but make sure to get on that church pew because I just knew it as a way of doing life. And I had been raised that way. And I didn't know the relationship that was necessary, right, to have with God. And so one time I did the drunk behavior, of course, got to church on time, got back to my apartment because I had ran away to college, by the way, made sure that I ran away far enough that family wasn't there. I was 10 hours away. So there was no one to catch me, right? It was just me and Jesus, and that was it, right? And so this one particular Sunday, I got back to my apartment and God intervened that day, spoke to me, and told me, you're not going to continue to do this. You're either going to go to hell or you're going to pursue me. You're going to choose which one you're going to do. And that day I chose him in the middle of my apartment. And I have been on that journey of healing and walking with him ever since. And that was at 19 years old.
Wow, that's incredible. Now, let's speak more about the how you coped with alcohol. I mean, obviously you had the trauma from fatherlessness, then you also had the trauma from being raped when you were 14 years old, and I'm sure that's just was really hard to overcome. I'm sure that was very traumatic to your life. Let's talk about the issue of alcoholism because a lot of people that's what they cope with, either some type of addiction. And my own dad grew up
Yeah.
fatherless. His dad died whenever he was 13 years old. And my dad, he one of the things that he coped with was alcoholism. That's one of the things that really separated him from our family. That's why he threw me to the cops when I was 10 months old. That's why he beat my mom up. That's why, he just couldn't pull it together because alcohol had such a grip on his life. And so talk more about that, how even talking to people that are listening right now that are struggling with that, where they're coping with alcoholism. Talk about that. Just share more about how
Yeah.
how
So,
you struggled with that, but then how you overcame it.
yeah. So alcohol was really just a mechanism for me to just drown out my pain.
Yeah.
But the thing about alcohol is that it wears off, right? You have to continue to drink to get that numbing, quote unquote numbing effect, and the problems do not go away. They're not going to go away. I don't care how much you drink. And so we have to deal with our inner demons. One thing about me, and from a mental health perspective, back then it was not talked about to go to counseling, right? And so I believe that God knew that I wasn't going, like, because it wasn't talked about. First of all, my mom never went. And in addition, I did not know of any resources on how to make sure that happened. I go to counseling today, every 3 weeks. I'm for sure in that chair. But back then, God had to interrupt my life 100% in order for me to make that turn and to change. Thankfully, now mental health and taking care of your mental health is huge out here. We must erase that stigma that if you have a problem, you need to say something, right? And be honest about it, because we are not meant to just carry the burden, time and time again. We are meant to actually do life with people. And a lot of times what happens with alcohol, it causes us to just be by ourselves, right? And to compact all of our problems and to make sure nobody else knows anything about us, putting on that whole facade. So whether you were like me and putting on that perfection facade, or just putting on a facade that just says you're okay, either one of those are not acceptable. If something is wrong, you need to say something and you need to pursue your own healing. It is very, very important that you pursue your own healing, despite of what other people may think or may say. It's important that we pursue and have loyalty for ourselves. I think that's one of the biggest things that I teach the girls is that at some point you have to be loyal to yourself.
Mm.
And what that means is that you have to pursue what's right for you. That means healing, right? That means justice. That also means understanding that people are toxic, right? I was around girls who would drink and get drunk and then and I was drinking as well, and then expect me to be the quote unquote designated driver when
Mm.
I was the one that didn't even be in a car and neither did any of them, right? And so, how do we ensure that we are in a healthy place? And that starts with our mind and making sure that we actually admit when there's a problem and that we pursue our health within our mindset.
Now, going more with even how God got a hold of you, what are some things that you put in place, or that you at that moment at 19 where you're like, hey, these are the things that I'm going to implement, or maybe it wasn't purposeful,
Yeah.
but what the things that you did to start walking with God more.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was my walk with God. When I heard God's voice, that interrupted me. I thought this is getting ready to be over. Like God is not playing. You know what I mean? He's not playing with me. And I needed that. I needed the like, I'm your father, I am not playing. Like you are going to be corrected.
Mhm.
And so my pursuit of God is that I stopped drinking, of course. In addition, going to church wasn't just going to church anymore. I was going to church to understand, right? Understand what he was trying to tell me, but also adding value to the church. I ended up getting baptized not too long after I submitted myself to God. And in addition, 2 years later, my father ended up coming back,
Oh,
which
wow.
is a whole swing to this whole entire story. I will say this, the fact that I had started my healing journey at 19, my father didn't come back until 21. I will tell you this, thankfully that I was already on that healing track. And so my commitment was to God. It was not to my dad. And we need to understand that, right? I believe if my father had came back before I was on the healing journey, he probably would have got cussed out and everything else. Like I would not be talking to him to this day, right? But because God pursued with me, right? And that he interrupted my life and I said, I'm going to submit unto you. The only way that this works is if I am underneath you and that you are going to walk me through this journey of being resentful and especially anger and bitter and to really change my character as to who I am and who I am supposed to become. Because up until then, I was always a victim, always a victim. Even in my mindset, I was a victim. Even though on the outside it was perfection, I was a victim, right? I was angry. I was still bitter for something that had happened many years ago. And I was okay with pointing the finger of blame to anybody who would believe me, receive it, say, agree with me, that type of thing. I was okay with that.
How do you get past the victim mentality? Because I know a lot of people that's something that just holds them down. Single
Yeah.
moms, fatherless individuals. How do you overcome that?
Yeah. See, that victim mentality actually keeps us in the past. And what we need to always focus on is what is the present and how do we get to the future? And we never ever get to the future always looking back. Victim mentality always has you looking back.
Mm.
And we don't need to look back anymore. Only reason why we look back is for a quick reference as to what our boundaries need to be going forward. But it is not a constant look back as to what happened to us. Our testimony frees us. That's what God says. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb, which we have through Jesus Christ, and by the word of our testimony. And so we no longer need to be bound by what has happened in the past. We need to be focused on what is our solution for the future and how we actually get there. And so forgiveness is a huge factor. God said, this is not whether you feel like it's or not, it's not based on your emotions. It's based on a yes or no decision. He said, forgive the others and I will forgive you. It was plain and simple. There was no caveats. There was nothing that said, well, if they did that, you don't have to forgive them. It's really about forgiveness and pursuing Him. What has He called you to do? And how He has paid it all for our healing. That's the important piece of it. But the past has nothing to do with what we want our future to be and how to pursue it. It's just a bump in the road, right? And we take that, add it up to our testimony, and really help others to overcome by it. And then also we overcome as well.
That is probably one of the best explanations of victimhood that I've heard. And you were talking, and Philippians 3:13 came to mind. Forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before. The next verse is, I press toward the mark for the prize, of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. It's telling us there, forget the past. It doesn't mean that you can't erase it all, but you forget the past. Try to let it go, and then reach forth to the future. Don't let the past hold you down. I love how you just explained that, and that's so powerful. Now, go into with when your dad came into your life. I mean, what was that like? Because I wished
Yeah.
my dad would have come back into my life. I never had that. I met him probably half a dozen times, but he was never interested in a relationship, and a lot of it was because of his own fatherless wounds and his
Mhm.
alcoholism. He just never could overcome it. So, what was that like having your dad coming back into your life?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So when my dad came back, I was still wanting that white picket fence. My expectations were on level 10. And he called me. He ended up calling me. It was maybe 7 o'clock at night during the winter. It was December, and he called me like, "Hi, this is Keith, and I'm sorry." Right. What I didn't know is that because I was really trying to understand, like, how did he even get my phone number? What I didn't know is that my mom had run into his cousin, and she had given my number to her, his cousin, and said, if you ever run into him, this is his daughter's phone number. So that's how he actually received my number and called me that day. Um, the conversation was interesting, especially since I wanted a father so bad still. My expectations for him was that he was going to come back running and that we were going to be like the best of friends. But what I didn't understand is that I made him a father. So the fact that he was gone for 20 years, he didn't know how to be one still, right? And so the fact that that piece I didn't grasp. I also didn't know this that he was still on drugs. And so when he came back to me, he was still in and out of that type of lifestyle. I spoke to him. We continued to talk. This was in December. In May, I was going to graduate from college. And so I asked him, will you be coming to my college graduation? And he was like, yeah, yeah, I'll be there. May rolls around and he does not show up. So another disappointment. So that level 10 that I was expecting, right? Up there, like he's going to be that
Yeah.
level 10. He could only deliver on a level 2. And so I kept getting disappointed time and time again because my expectations wasn't meeting the level that he was able to deliver. Now, a lot of times when that happens, when someone comes back into play, specifically a father or even a mother, people, because of their unhealed wounds, they will cut that person out of their life immediately. You can't deliver us to what I'm expecting you to deliver, so we're done. But I beg to differ because of the fact that because I am healed and my commitment was to God, I knew God that anything that would happen between me and my father, I knew God would have my back because we had already journeyed this healing road for the last 2 years. And he understood the disappointment that I had had for so long ago. And so I still pursued a relationship with my father. I ended up being the one that actually went down to Atlanta, paid for it, went to go see him myself, and I actually went to go see him multiple times by myself because of the fact that he couldn't do it. There were money situations, etc. I'm sure a lot of people will be like, well, that wasn't your responsibility. It wasn't. But I wanted a relationship with my father. And however I could get it, I was willing to get it, not being stepped on, still setting boundaries, right? But at the same time, I can still pursue a relationship out of respect of what I wanted to have with my father and make sure to protect myself, right? And so I did end up, lowering my expectations so that I wasn't constantly disappointed again, and again. We have a relationship today. I will talk to him every 1 or 2 months, etc. But it's not your everyday. I talk to my dad all the time.
Yeah.
We don't have that type of relationship. And accepting that relationship as your own is the important piece. You cannot compare, the fact that this person has been gone for 20 years and then you want to have the classified, relationship with your father. It doesn't work that way. And I had to learn that. It took me some time to learn and understand that. But we are very clear on our relationship now. I actually had to have a conversation with him today. He called me for a first time in a long time, but I had a conversation with him today about fatherlessness. I don't think he understands really the impact of fatherlessness and what it actually means for a father to walk away. We were talking about some of the students that I taught today, but I think opening his eyes to say, like, your impact he is huge, is huge.
Yeah.
I think he's starting to understand every day about what actually a father brings to the table and how important it is, and what was missed out on. Because I think that he believes, like, well, your mother was good. Yeah, that's not enough, right? Our fathers are the ones that give us the self worth, our self confidence to understand who we are, what we value. That doesn't come from our mother, that comes from our fathers. And so, our fathers, when it comes to, especially with girls, that value, that self worth, we make decisions. Everybody does, right? Whether it's girls or boys, but girls, they make those decisions based on that. And so when our value is when we're undervaluing ourselves or our confidence is low, those dominoes fall based on that, right? Based on those decisions, our dominoes start falling. And so you can see the impact through our decision making. And so that's why we go into high schools and intercede for these girls and step in for these teen girls so they can stop making these decisions based on their lack of self work and lack of self confidence, that we can pour into them, pay attention to them, but also try to increase their resiliency and their self worth so that they can start making better decisions because it impacts them as a whole. So our mothers are great, but they can't step in and do what a father is inherently doing per God's grace, right? Inherently supposed to do per God's grace. I want to make sure that that's clear. Fathers are always important. They will always be important, and they cannot be replaced.
That's so powerful. And we have about 3 minutes left. I want to give you some time to talk just a little more about your ministry. Tell us more about your organization and how people can get involved with what you do.
Yes, yes. So the ministry is From Fatherless to Fearless. So just go to FromFatherlessToFearless.org. We have plenty of ways for you to get involved. You can send us a contact us message. We are excited for you to partner with us, especially with coming in for career talks, right? Not just hearing from the employees and the staff here, but also people out in the community that have these impactful stories. In addition, we always want volunteers for our end of the semester trips that we have, to really see the growth from our girls and understand where they've come. It is powerful and impactful for them to be with us for 3.5 months and to see the change that God has really orchestrated with these girls. But we're excited to really partner with you guys. The community is what helps us and supports us to do this work. We see such a huge problem within Ohio. We're at the state of emergency levels when it comes to youth mental health, suicide, drug addiction. Ohio is at the top of some of those numbers, definitely over the average for the United States average. Ohio is up there. And so we are really pursuing these girls because these are the girls that are more likely to commit crimes, more likely to use drugs, more likely, of course, to have teenage pregnancies, et cetera. But it all starts with their self-worth, their self-confidence, who they are, and that stems from, do their parents think that they're worth it? And when your father walks away, that leaves you a lot of questions.
So powerful, Candice, your ministry, your story. We're so thankful that we were able to have you on. I would encourage our listeners to definitely check out her books, check out her resources, check out her ministry. You're doing great work. Thanks so much for being on with us today. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode of Let's Talk About Fatherlessness. We want to now challenge you to take the next step by either starting a single mom community group in your church or with your ministry, or by joining our network of God is My Dad churches and ministries. Isn't it a great experience to be able to start a single mom community group?
Yeah, and it's just, if you talk to single moms, a lot of times what they'll tell you is the one thing they're lacking is that community, just a group that they can go in and they know there's no judgment. Everyone may not have the same situation. Everyone doesn't know what they're going through, but they can go in and they know there's no judgment. And it takes that kind of that restriction and that wall down for them so that they can share and then that they can grow in Christ.
And our single mom community groups are a wonderful ministry. And if your church can start one, we'd love to have you. We can help you get set up. We have the curriculum and all the resources you need. If you can't start one, we'd love to have you start by joining our network of churches and ministries, our God is My Dad network of churches and ministries, where you can get your church or your ministry on our map, and people can find you and find your ministry in your church so that they can get plugged into your church or ministry locally. So check that out. You can find all these resources at lifefactors.org. We have books, we have all kinds of content on there at lifefactors.org. Check it out today.